On March 17th, two American journalists, Laura Ling and Yuna Lee, who had been reporting on the trafficking of women, were arrested near the China-North Korea border. It's unclear if they strayed into North Korea or were grabbed by aggressive border guards who crossed into China, but recent statements suggested they admitted to deliberately crossing into the country. The arrest resulted in North Korea's top court sentencing them in June to 12 years of hard labor. It wasn't until after much negotiation between the U.S. and North Korea that President Bill Clinton was asked to fly to North Korea to secure their release. It was a joyous family homecoming for these two women who learned that it can be risky business when a person makes the decision to ignore the rules and cross boundaries. Crossing boundaries is dangerous. The boundaries are there for a reason. They're meant to keep things the way they are, to maintain status quo. And when boundaries are crossed, you're only asking for trouble. This morning's gospel text found in the 7th chapter of Mark, verses 24 through 30, is about crossing boundaries. Prior to the reading, Jesus had just finished doing what he seemed to do best, that being making a pain of himself in the keister to the Pharisees and scribes. He had run down their religion and insulted them all by attacking their religious traditions and accusing them of hypocrisy. He had charged them with tending to their own needs at the expense of those who were helpless to defend themselves. Nice work, Jesus. Time for a vacation, right? Maybe grab a weekend bungalow on the Mediterranean seashore. Yeah, that sounds nice. So where does he decide to spend his getaway time? In Tyre. Not within the Jewish city of Caesarea, but instead within the region of Tyre and Sidon, a land far to the north. Sidon, which was barely within the country of Israel. To say that Jesus was in the region trying to get some R&R was about as likely as saying that the two journalists, Laura Ling and Yuna Lee, were doing the same thing in North Korea. No, Jesus was crossing boundaries. And as we know, that can be a dangerous thing. So let's not make the mistake of imagining that Jesus was hanging out among his friends and cohorts when a foreign woman crashed the party. Jesus was in foreign territory, Syrophoenician territory to be exact. Jesus was the foreigner, not the woman. But Jesus wasn't the only boundary crosser in this story. You see, the woman was every bit a boundary crosser as was Jesus. Even though it was her hometown, she had no business being where she was. For one thing, we read in this morning's first verse that he did not want anyone to know he was there. Kind of like Ling and Lee would have liked it if North Korean authorities hadn't noticed their presence. But even though it was supposed to be a somewhat clandestine visit, this woman seemed to have no compunction about blowing Jesus' cover. Secondly, she was not the right ethnicity. She was a Syrophoenician, and Jesus was from Israel. Tensions were just as high between people of different countries as they are today. Third, she was a woman. We need to remember that women didn't have a whole lot of rights back in Jesus' days. Quite frankly, they weren't much more than property. They possessed second-class citizen status, something comparable to slaves. Their roles were to prepare meals and serve the family and guests. They were expected to produce as many children as possible and to raise them. Women couldn't pursue higher education or even worship in the same space as men. But most importantly, men were advised against associating with women. And here we have this unnamed woman, not worth noting her name since she was only a woman after all, this woman who was demanding an audience with Jesus. And if that wasn't enough, she was a Gentile. She wasn't a convert into the Jewish faith. She was a Gentile. Quite simply, she was the wrong religion. Everyone knew that God had chosen the Jews to be the light of the world, not the Gentiles. So here was someone who was the wrong ethnicity, wrong gender, and wrong religion blatantly intruding upon Jesus' privacy with a request for her daughter. Yes, this may have been her home turf, but she was crossing boundaries. No, she was crashing through boundaries in every sense of the word. And these two boundary crossers, Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman, meet in a head-on collision within this morning's text and go into toe-to-toe verbal combat. Both of them taking risks. Jesus in foreign territory, apparently getting his dander up enough to resort to name-calling, referring to her as a dog. It would seem that diplomacy wasn't among Jesus' stronger gifts. And this woman crashing a party, a place she had no business at, making demands and even challenging the rabbi after he basically told her to get lost. What would make them risk so much? I believe the short answer is passion. Passion is what seems to drive people to cross boundaries, risk their safety, jeopardize their own dignity in order to achieve their goal.